Hey everyone, I'm Jessica Kramer for MRC-TV. Today we're speaking with Sarah Parshall Perry, a legal fellow from the Heritage Foundation, to discuss President Biden's change in due process policy in schools and what that means for those accused of sexual assault, especially students. Ms. Perry, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
So it appears the White House Gender Policy Council is, quote, beginning Biden's promised effort to dismantle Trump-era rules on sexual misconduct that afforded greater protections to students accused of assault. Is that an accurate statement? Did President Trump really afford greater due process rights, or is it just that President Obama rolled a lot of them back?
That's an accurate characterization. In fact, you cannot give someone more due process than they are already legally entitled to under the law. And for hundreds of years, our jurisprudence have recognized a constitutionally protected right to due process. And what the previous administration did under Betsy DeVos during the era of approximately 2017 going forward until its release in 2020 was work fastidiously for 2 years on research during a rulemaking process and solicited comments from over 124,000 stakeholders, met with individual stakeholders, including those who had suffered sexual assault, to come up with what many people understood to be an accurate balance of interest between the accused and the individual who is making the accusation. It protected due process rights for both individuals in a very tricky format. But this was not a law that was hastily undertaken and was upheld immediately in a lawsuit brought by 5 states that was an attempt to prevent the previous law from going into effect. And that injunction was denied. And the federal judge, found that the law was entirely legal and protected the interests of all parties involved. This is an interested president and his administration who has issued some contradictory statements on gender identity, sexuality, and sexual violence. And ultimately, it could be a remaking of our understanding of Title IX overall.
Wow. Well, I was looking a little bit into what President Obama rolled back. Can you give us some background on what that administration looked like and then what Betsy DeVos was trying to fix?
Sure. So the Obama administration instituted a policy in 2011 that resulted in over 100 lawsuits with an average cost of about $350,000 to $1 million, successful lawsuits brought by individuals, predominantly males, who had been accused falsely of sexual assault. And the previous regulation in 2011, going forward until Trump took office and Betsy DeVos began work on a rulemaking process, there was no opportunity to question the accuser. There was a use of what was called preponderance of the evidence as a legal standard, as opposed to the higher clear and convincing standard. There was no opportunity to include exculpatory evidence that might go to the correctness of the allegations and prove them to be false. There was ultimately very little, if any, opportunity to mount a defense. And the previous administration recognized these massive weaknesses, understanding that there were individuals who were accused who may actually be innocent. So during this rulemaking process, Betsy DeVos and her administration included, among other things, not only a change to that higher level of clear and convincing evidence, but also instituted policy councils at each of the universities or the schools in which there wasn't just one individual making a determination as to the rightness or wrongness of an accusation, but a number of individuals who were all experts in making these kinds of determination. It also allowed the opportunity to include exculpatory evidence and to question both the accuser and to call witnesses, more like a quasi-judicial proceeding, which would really protect the interests not only of the accused, but of the accuser as well. So it was a great balance and included many of those legal protections that should have been in place from the outset.
Wow. Well, I think for those of us who aren't lawyers, I'm having a hard time understanding why this is even on the White House's radar at all. Are crimes or accusations of sexual assault, are they within the jurisdiction of the federal government, or are they dealt with on a local level, be it the institution or local law enforcement? Can you kind of give a background or explain to our viewers why this is political at all?
Well, it shouldn't be political. That's actually a great question. The short answer is that these types of claims are strictly civil claims for a violation of Title IX, over which the Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights has jurisdiction. As concerns criminal investigations, those proceed on a different level at the state and local level. So those would proceed separately, but sometimes these are dual tracked, and an individual decides that they're going to pursue one avenue or the other first. Sometimes they transpire simultaneously. If the Department of Education has to go into court, the Department of Justice, their Office of Civil Rights Litigation Division, is the one that actually brings the suit on the Department of Education's behalf. But these are strictly claims for violation of Title IX, over which Department of Ed has jurisdiction. Now, these, again, are common sense protections. They concretize the due process that already exists in federal law. And ultimately, we're seeing, again, some manifestations of the political leanings of this administration. On the one hand, President Biden was the author of the Violence Against Women Act. He has selected a vice president that is a female. He has spoken publicly about his interest to represent females. And yet, he is eager to sign the Equality Act, which completely eliminates protections for biological girls and women in an educational format. So this is an administration, I think, that can't necessarily get its messaging right. And one of those areas is this particular rule and rolling back protections, the due process protections of those who are accused.
Well, not only that, but I mean, do you think it's lost on the Biden administration that, he would not be able to survive this accusation against him based on these standards? So by that measure, should we believe Tara Reade?
It's very interesting because a lot of people have pointed out that hypocrisy that under the previous regulation, under the Obama era regulation back in 2011, President Biden himself would not have been able to satisfy any of these allegations of Tara Reade, which again presents sort of a two-faced approach to the interpretation of sexual violence under Title IX. But again, this is just another area in which the Department of Education under Miguel Cardona and President Biden himself has instituted contradictory policy by saying we want to protect women. We would not necessarily have been protected ourselves under the previous rule, but also we will include biological males in private spaces and girls' athletics. So the gender, sexuality, and sexual orientation narrative is very convoluted coming out of this administration. And I think a lot of us are longing for clarity and a return to what is legally appropriate under federal law.
You think we'll get that?
I'm hopeful, but it will be dependent on individuals who are going to stand up and be vocal about what the law indicates is already protection for us. I am hopeful that the Equality Act will be defeated in the Senate before it makes it to President Biden's desk. If not, I do believe that there will be numerous legal challenges that will be mounted against the Equality Act. And I also predict that there will be lawsuits that will follow in the wake of an amended Title IX. Again, this was $350,000 to $1 million in settlement and judicial outcomes during this era, and there were over 100 of them. So that's a massive tax, not only on resources available in the judicial system, but in the education system. We don't want to return to an era of having to spend money to defend against claims that are poorly adjudicated because the evidence wasn't approved and entered. That's really what the previous administration was hoping to avoid: protect all equally, give everyone the due process they're entitled to, and make sure that all rights are protected.
Wow. Well, we really appreciate your expertise. Thank you again for coming on and speaking with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.